would be able to implement creative and innovative solutions along with other civil society partners and government agencies. So CPF has a unique niche. It's unique for 5 different reasons. The first is that through grants, we provide our funding direct to civil society. The funds expand and complement the activities of our donor partners. We target biodiversity hotspots, and we build region-specific investment strategies before going into a biodiversity hotspot. And we create strategic working alliances between a diverse range of stakeholders. Oops, sorry, we needed that. So here's a map of the biodiversity hotspots. To date, we've invested in 21 different hotspots. And since 2000, our investments have occurred in 53 countries. We've invested in, through grants, $139 million. And those funds have leveraged an additional $318 million, going to over 1,600 civil society groups. And of the many results achieved, one of them is that over 21 million hectares of critical ecosystems now have strengthened management and protection. Some of the key areas that we invest in are catalyzing innovation through field demonstrations, which I'll mention later, building capacity through partnership, supporting sustainable livelihoods in critical ecosystems, and engaging a wide variety of partners, in particular the private sector, and building green economies. As I said before, investing in any one region, we have a system of developing ecosystem profiles, which are multi-stakeholder conservation plans and visions, which establish a common conservation vision. And these are developed through a process of extensive stakeholder consultations and desk research. We identify conservation priorities, funding gaps, opportunities, and areas where CPF and other donors can invest. And most important, these stakeholder plans generate momentum for collaboration, partnerships, and testing of innovative approaches. So now I'd like to give you 6 different examples of what some of our grantees have done. The first example is in the Western Ghats. The Keystone Foundation, one of our grantees, has focused on integrating hydrological services into district policy. This has happened in a case study area in the Kono River in the Nilgiris Biosphere Reserve. And this area has very important upstream highland shoal grasslands and swamps. The downstream are local communities that are relying on the water flows coming down from those upland areas. Our project has involved undertaking research to document the impacts of different land use practices and patterns, and in particular demonstrating changes in water quality and quantity. And we've complemented that with a series of stakeholder dialogues involving local communities and other stakeholders such as the local municipal government. And the results of the research and these discussions are being used to promote the integration of hydrological services into district government policy for agriculture, forestry, and tourism sectors. And this is a model that we hope is going to get wider replication in the Western Ghats. My next example is in South Africa, where our grantees, Conservation International and the South African National Biodiversity Institute, have placed biodiversity specialists into government offices to ensure that natural infrastructure is incorporated into planning. And in this region, which is an arid landscape that is, in the past, has been especially valued for mining and for grazing, but not a whole lot else, through the biodiversity specialists have been able to stimulate interest in its value, in particular for tourism. And the local municipalities have found that the assistance that these specialists have provided, in particular for the planning purposes, have resulted in people being hired on a permanent basis. Next example is back to India, where one of our grantees, the Puja Trust, is working with Forestry College and the Forest Department to restore freshwater swamps. These are once formed a very extensive network, very critical for hydrological and ecological functions. They contain a large number of endemic species that are serve very important ecological functions. These species also have economic value and cultural value. And the swamps themselves are very important in maintaining groundwater flows and reducing runoff. Yet these swamps are being converted to plantations. So what our grantee has done is to develop decentralized tree nurseries to raise seedlings to replant in these swamps to restore them. And that has resulted in successful restoration of several chains of swamps. And this methodology is much appreciated by the Forest Department, and they are likely to take this up and replicate it elsewhere. In South Africa, we've supported WWF South Africa to launch a water balance program in which water audits are conducted of private corporations who then make financial contributions to offset their water use. And the funds are used to manage and restore the upper watersheds through removal of invasive species, through grazing and land offsets. And this also has stimulated collaboration with government-sponsored projects to remove invasive species, and this work is going to contribute to the restoration of this watershed, and we hope that it's going to be an example that's going to be replicated beyond KwaZulu-Natal. In Tanzania, we've supported CARE Tanzania to look at payment for ecosystem service program in the Uluguru Mountains, which is the source of the Ruvu River, which is the main water source for Dar es Salaam. This grantee has promoted more equitable rewards for the communities who live downstream from the Uluguru Mountains, awareness raising and capacity building for both water users, the buyers, and the sellers, the local communities. And this has caused a shift in land use practices and has reduced the impacts on those watersheds and improved the quantity and the quality of water services. And as a result, two companies, Coca-Cola Tanzania and the Dar es Salaam Water and Sewage Corporation, have entered into PES agreements with the upland communities. And a final example from the Caribbean, the Dominican Republic, the government has shown a great interest in the use of financial mechanisms to protect natural infrastructure, and they've actually put a legal framework in place. And one of our grantees, the Instituto Tecnológico de Santo Domingo, is working with the National Institute of Water and local civil society organizations that are responsible for managing 2 forest reserves to develop a PES scheme for water services. And these 2 forest reserves are critical for supplying water to a major agricultural region that is important for food production for the Dominican Republic. So this project is just getting started, but we're hoping that it's going to be successful and that it's going to be an example for other parts of the Dominican Republic as well as other countries in the Caribbean. So thank you, and I look forward to more of your thoughts and questions.
Next over to Valerie on how do we scale up from 6 school pilots to the world, since we're for the World Bank.
Well, that is a great question. A difficult one to answer, I think, but I have to start with a confession. My name is Valerie. I work for the World Bank, and we love concrete. We really do. We spend tens of billions of dollars every year supporting government to buy concrete, pour concrete, to make everything out of concrete. So we do like infrastructure. I'm not quite sure about natural infrastructure yet. So here's the question we have at the bank. Can natural infrastructure be an engine of inclusive green growth? And I I have to differ with Andrew a little bit here, and I think I agree with him. I'm not sure we can. And I think at the bank right now, the answer we have to that question, can it be an engine of green growth, of inclusive green growth, is sometimes. So I'm going to give you an example of three ways we're using natural infrastructure, and then I want to pose some questions as to how I think we wonder about whether we can scale that up. The first way we're using it is to increase resilience of the rural frontier for poor communities. So basically, where we think grey infrastructure, so traditional infrastructure, is just not cost effective in dispersed rural communities where there just aren't enough end users to justify a big investment in grey infrastructure, at least not yet under current technologies. Talking about using natural infrastructure for food security, for energy security, to create a social safety net. These can be cost-effective and proven solutions that nature can provide. In this sense, we agree with IUCN's shift in its program that nature can be a solution. But our question is, can this be scaled up? Can it deliver at scale? It works in small rural outposts where there may not be other options, but can it work elsewhere? One of the other places we're quite comfortable with natural infrastructure is in the water sector. Particularly in hydropower, for example, we have seen again and again that, for example, proper upper watershed management can reduce siltation in a reservoir. You can prolong the life of a reservoir, and this is incredibly important. We've spent a lot of money in Latin America, in Asia, on hydropower facilities, and we have now, we always insist that there is an upper watershed component in these hydropower operations, because we know the science is proven. Proper watershed management does reduce siltation, prolongs the life of a dam. It's a good thing. But here's a question for us on that. We do that because the natural infrastructure clearly does provide a service for the hydropower facility. But it doesn't always provide a service for biodiversity conservation. Here's something that we struggle with in the World Bank, is the fact that when we talk about natural infrastructure, sometimes biodiversity can be a co-benefit, but sometimes it doesn't have to be. You can have a managed agricultural landscape in an upper watershed that manages the water services just below. So again, we ask, natural infrastructure can work. We've shown it to work for hydropower facilities, for example, but does it work for biodiversity? The third way that we embrace natural infrastructure, we're beginning to embrace natural infrastructure, is looking at ways to help communities adapt to climate change. But again, we're talking about doing this in rural, dispersed communities, where again, grey infrastructure just isn't cost effective. It's not coming anytime soon. And as an international community, we have a responsibility to protect these people, just as much as protecting people who live in big urban conglomerates. And so natural infrastructure has proven to be what we hope is the way to do this. So you've heard Andrew talk about, mangroves, mangrove restoration. But there's another but for us. We don't know that the evidence is clear that natural infrastructure can actually successfully help folks adapt to the potential natural disasters that are going to be more severe and more regular because of climate change. Do natural solutions work effectively against potential adverse impacts from climate change? I'm not sure. We all talk about the importance of mangroves. I, for one, and we, the World Bank, haven't yet seen the concrete evidence that these are as effective as a seawall. We don't know what the failure rate is in mangroves. And these are questions of life and death for people. We as a World Bank, and I think we as a community, can't afford to invest in an unproven solution. We can't play with people's lives. So again, it's another question that we need to think about in terms of natural infrastructure. So those are the three areas that the bank has begun to embrace natural infrastructure as a social safety net for rural communities to help those rural communities adapt to climate change and other crises, food crises, and in our water sector, particularly the hydropower sector. But that leaves us with the question of how do we deliver natural infrastructure at scale? How do we scale up? So for that, we have basically 5 questions. We call it the natural infrastructure alphabet that we think we have to achieve if we're going to bring natural infrastructure to scale. So the first part of that is we have to account. We have to build sufficient information systems and generate data that analyzes the uses, the depletion, and the productivity of natural infrastructure against words, we need to build that evidence base. We need to understand failure rates. We need to understand how ecosystem services, how natural infrastructure works, how it can be used, how quickly is it depleted, what are its tipping points. It's an important part of the question. The second part is bargaining. We're going A, B, C, D here. So B is bargaining. We have to bargain with decision makers based on the evidence that we collect under our accounting stream to inform them how to allocate natural infrastructure amongst users efficiently and optimally. Because I think sometimes there's a sense that natural infrastructure provides all things to all people. But of course, like a lot of infrastructure, there can be winners and losers. Some people have access to it, some people don't. Some people benefit, some people don't. And we have to work with decision makers to understand those questions, understand who the winners and losers are. Thirdly, we have to codify the term of the practice. I think there remains a deep misunderstanding or failure to understand exactly what we mean when we say natural infrastructure. I think there's a wealth of information out there. We've in some ways adopted the term and we use it quite openly and quite often, but do we actually understand exactly what we mean? When I talk about natural infrastructure, is it the same thing that my colleagues on the panel are you sitting down mean? If I speak to a minister of finance, our key stakeholders in the bank, I'm not sure they know what we mean when we say natural infrastructure. And then we start talking about green infrastructure. Is it the same thing? I don't know. And so again, we have to codify our terms, be very careful about what we mean, and have a consensus on the discussion so that we're all talking about the same thing. The next thing we have to do is delegate. We have to strengthen the institutional frameworks, build technical skills, and increase accountability for natural infrastructure. And we all talk about how one of the big threats to natural infrastructure is that it can be open access. So you have free rider problems. We really need to work very carefully to make sure that the institutional frameworks are in place, that natural infrastructure is properly managed, and that it's inclusively managed. This is very, very important. And the final